So, I never believed in the supernatural until I was like 18, and me and my friends played with an Ouija board, which is a story for another time, of course. Anyway, after the ensuing craziness from that escapade, I'm a full on believer. On with the actual sighting, though. I live in a very rural part of Mississippi. Like, I believe my town has something like 247 people in it. Everybody literally knows everybody. And weird things have happened before, like animals being slaughtered or going missing, that sort of thing. Naturally, we chalked it up to coyotes or other critters in the area. I'm an avid hunter, so I was heading out to the woods with my bow, a fully decked out Matthews Creed. I got out a little earlier than usual, so it was still pretty dark. I've never minded the woods before, so all I planned on doing was relaxing in my stand as I didn't feel like stalking today. It's not too far from daylight, so the birds and other wildlife are starting to make their morning calls. Usually pretty peaceful, right? I swear to God, in the span of a second, everything in that patch of woods shut up at the exact same time. Dead silence. It didn't even try to be subtle. That alone scared the piss out of me. So naturally, my scared self froze and just listened for anything. It was so quiet you could literally hear a pen drop. My first thought was, oh shit, something's out here with me, which freaked me out even more. Then I started to think maybe it was just a bear or a bobcat, which I still was terrified to meet up with, but at least it gave me a logical answer. I figured I could hear a bear coming, but I knew big cats were renowned for stalking people without their knowing, which scared the daylight out of me. I decided to keep moving towards my stand, post up, and just point my bow down the tree. After what seemed like forever, I freaking made it. I shuffled up the stand, pulled out my knife just in case, and just listened intently. Dawn was definitely breaking now, which made me feel a lot better. Still no sounds of wildlife, which was getting more and more eerie now. My stand is perched on the side of a creek, and the creek wasn't very deep. Like maybe to the top of your ankle. About the only sound I could hear was the slight noise of the running water. Then I hear something to my right, and it is running fast. I instantly raise my bow and wait, shitting my pants. It's getting louder and louder, closer as well. I almost screamed when I saw this bastard. It literally looked like something out of Dog Soldiers, only more muscular. This thing busted through the brush, ran down the slope and through the creek, and then disappeared on the other side. I have seen some shit, let me tell you, but I was shaking like a newborn baby. I didn't ease off my drawstring for like 10 minutes, which is a long time to hold a bow, just FYI for those of you who aren't familiar with bows. I mean, this thing was huge, like 6.5 feet to 7.5 feet tall, 250 pounds of just hell no. And I've seen bears and the like before. They do not run like that at all. Anyway, after that, the sun really started to show and the birds started chirping. I had calmed myself down, so I noped out of there in a hurry. While I was terrified at the time, it's definitely going to be one of my coolest memories to look back on. I'm just going to move my stand and hunt elsewhere now. And for those of you who have never checked out the movie Dog Soldiers, that's a pretty good idea of what I saw. My encounter happened in Kane, Pennsylvania, in the Allegheny National Forest along Route 6, and this happened in late fall. I was going home from work on Route 6 when a very tall, massive, wolf-like man crossed the road in front of me. After I passed it and looked in my rearview mirror, it crossed the road again to where it came from. It did not look in my direction, but I saw it in full view as it entered the road at an angle facing me. It was extremely tall, very muscular, with pitch black hair, and weird-looking legs, kind of like that of how a dog's bow and bend backwards. And it had very strange, glowing amber eyes. In March 2015, I woke up at around 3 a.m. I have no idea why. Usually, I wake up to drink water or even use the restroom, but I needed neither of those things. Anyway, I was living in Southern California at the time near Camp Pendleton, and where I lived, there was my neighborhood and then just wilderness. There was nothing beyond my neighborhood for miles, just land. Just an FYI, I have always been into the supernatural, but I don't think I ever really believed it until this experience. Before I went to sleep, I opened my window because it was hot and I had my curtains open and my shades open and pulled up to make sure air was getting in. So at 3 a.m., I woke up and just looked out my window, which was next to my bed, and I thought I saw someone standing at the crosswalk across the street. I was just thinking, that's so weird, because usually we don't have any runners or any early morning walkers until roughly 5 a.m. So I got up and went to my window so I could get a closer look, and what I saw I will never forget. This thing was standing, but its legs were bent and it had some white fur covering the body. However, I could still see some skin. Its back was hunched over and its face looked like some sort of dog's. If this creature was standing straight up, I'd say that it would be roughly 7 or 8 feet tall. Now, mind you, this was at 3 a.m., so I was just like, wow, okay, you're hallucinating, just go back to sleep. However, I was a little paralyzed and could not take my eyes off of this creature. Its nose and ears just looked so similar to a dog or some sort of wolf or coyote. Where I lived, coyotes were very prevalent. However, they never really came into the neighborhood. So as you can tell, I was just completely shocked and nervous, and as I was about to shut my windows, the thing turned its head and stared right at me. It was standing directly under a streetlight, so I could see its features very clearly, and its eyes were so black, but somehow they were shining to where you could really see them staring right into your soul. That did it for me. I slammed my window shut, pulled down the blinds, closed the curtains, and jumped right into bed while pulling the covers over my face. I never did go back to sleep that night. Now, flash forward 2 years later, in June of 2017, I again woke up, but this time I was just hungry. So I went downstairs to get some food and sat at my kitchen table. In the chair that I sat, my back was facing the window on the side of the house. Now this window was about a foot off the ground and it was open about 10 inches because my mom had just forgotten to shut it. Now that window had no screen because it had got torn somehow and we just didn't get around to replacing it yet. Anyway, I had my earbuds in and was watching a movie or some show. I can't exactly remember, but I heard a noise. I couldn't tell if it was from the movie or from outside, so I just paused and listened. I then heard heavy breathing, but I have never heard this kind of breathing before, and it was coming from directly behind me, right outside the window. The breathing was rough, rigid, and sounded nothing like a human. I was too scared to turn around, but the hairs on the back of my neck were standing up, and I had goosebumps everywhere. The breathing lasted for about 2 minutes, and then I heard heavy footsteps as if this thing was walking away. After about 10 minutes have passed, I shut the window, locked it, closed the curtains, and ran up to my room. I told my parents about my first encounter the next day after it happened. I was 16 at the time and still living with them. They just kind of looked at me and laughed and said I was probably seeing things and it was probably just a coyote. After my second encounter, I told them the next day, and that time they really thought I was just tired and was hearing things. My question to everyone out there is, have you had any experiences to something similar? Or was this just a coyote, or do you guys think I was hallucinating? It's been bothering me for a while now, and I had to get this story out so people could know. Starting with a bit of backstory, I'm a born and raised Long Islander. So are my parents. They met out east, which in Islander talk means the east end of the island. To any NYC rich kids, that means the Hamptons. But for the rest of us who are coincidentally not millionaires, it means the North Fork. Now, to get the geographically confusing, But Long Island is accurately named Long Island that forks off about a 3/4 of the way down the 90 miles it stretches. It kind of just looks like a fish with its mouth open, with the North Fork being where the eyes are and the Hamptons being the jaw. Shelter Island is somewhere in the middle, like a smaller fish about to be eaten. Honestly, just save yourself a lot of contemplating and Google it. So, my mom's family had a summer house on the North Fork. My dad's had a house on Shelter Island. My parents met working at a summer job, and the rest is history. But super long explanation to short, I grew up getting to pretend to be a boogie because I had not one, but 2 summer houses. I know, right? Shelter Island is like my favorite place. In a lot of ways, just the island itself feels magical. The only access is by ferry, and while traveling there, you feel like you're being transported into a different world. But the picture of Shelter Island in the summer is very different than the winter. In the summer, the population rises to roughly around 20,000 people. But in the winter, not more than 2,000 people. There are something like 14 students in a graduating class. The people there literally dress up like each other for Halloween. This doesn't necessarily pertain to my encounter, but it's for real creepy and makes me wonder just how involved my encounter could be with the locals. So I was around 12 or 13 at the time, and I had invited my best friend Lauren to come out with my family that weekend. I was so excited, as it was one of the first times Lauren was able to come out. I remember our bathroom was being renovated at the time, and so the only other bathroom we could use was in the dark, dank basement. And that's the only connection to the house was going outside and downstairs, and then down another set of stairs into the basement. So it had to have been around 10 o'clock, and we went together to the bathroom to brush our teeth. The moon was almost full, so bright that it provided some light on an island that street lamps were far and few in between. If it wasn't for the light of the moon, we probably would have passed the creature altogether without even realizing, because out there you can hardly see 2 feet in front of you, even when it's dark. As we were coming back up the stairs, laughing about something menial, was when we saw it. It was about 10 feet away, with its back to us, lurking near my shed. We both froze and did that thing where you take a quick breath and hold it, involuntarily. That made the creature notice us immediately. Its head whipped around and his eyes were glowing, kind of a blood red. It didn't look angry per se, but rather like a feral dog, not knowing how to react to these 2 little girls observing it. Almost as if not to scare us, he slowly rose up to full size, which I would guess was around 7 feet if not more. The whole time it never broke eye contact. I felt I could fall into the pits of blood that its eyes were. I was covered in long, shaggy black hair and had the legs like that of a beast. After standing there, frozen in horror, for at least a good minute, all the while, still in this staring contest, we both regained control of our feet and ran up the stairs screaming for my parents. "We saw a werewolf! We saw a werewolf!" My dad went out first and we followed. My dad, of course, quickly dismissed it and went back inside, a bit disgruntled. I could have sworn I saw a bush where it was near. Over the years, I've had many theories, one of which is that the natives who lived on the island before the white man are responsible, as shape-shifting legends are prevalent in indigenous people's culture. However, skinwalkers in native legend usually choose to be so, very unlike the werewolf curse we so know and love. Maybe it's the descendants of the people who stole this land, cursed to turn under the full moon, choosing isolation to protect their secret. For 9 months out of the 12, anyway. In the mid-'80s, my cousin and I, we saw this. I'd call it a werewolf. We saw it on a gravel road, but I was raised as a Christian, so seeing something like this, it looked like it was beautiful, but it was evil, and it bothered me for a long time, until about 1994. My mom called me and she said they seen the same thing you and Elizabeth saw up in Wisconsin. So I did a little research and it made me feel better. Like it wasn't just me that saw this. Glenda Godfrey, being a real reporter and not being afraid to tell a real story and not just hiding it, like I can't do that, it would make me look crazy. I appreciate what she did, and she actually helped me a lot because we saw in 1986 in December this creature. I came back from Dallas to my little town in Mississippi where I was raised in. My cousin said that they're having this Christmas party, and so I told her I want to see a deer because I hadn't seen a deer in a long time, and so I've been stuck in the city. She said, we'll take this poorhouse road, this little gravel road between these two main highways. And so we're riding in a little Toyota pickup, and the headlights hit what I thought was a deer. It was kind of hunched over in the road, and she said, there's one right now. And she took off real fast with the bright lights on. And we stopped maybe 25 feet from it, just thinking it's going to run off into the woods and everything and all. But it stayed there, and it raised up, and it was, maybe 7 feet tall. But it had its back to us. And a little like rabbit or something took off. I remember seeing it going off to the right, and just for maybe a second it blurred. Kind of moved back and forth, kind of like when you spin on a top and you can't see the pattern on the top because it becomes like a blur when it starts spinning. That's why I think maybe it was from another dimension because it spun like that. I mean, it kind of like blurred. Then it stopped, and then it turned around and it walked straight. Not like a regular animal running in the woods to the left and the right to get away. Then it came straight for the driver's side of the Toyota. I was in the passenger side, and it was it had fur, it had mud on the rump of it, and it was whiter in the middle, like you said. It was kind of leaning over toward the front, walking. The legs were like big, like a donkey or a mule, or even a horse, but they were like a wolf. They had that backward look to it. It was an animal, but I don't know. I thought about it for years. I just don't know. Did I see a spirit? I'm not sure. It had the mud on it, and it wasn't afraid of us. For sure, it had a power, like it looked at us like we were just stockpiled in the road. I think back now, and it could have killed us if it wanted to. It walked right by, and when it got to the front of the Toyota, it was just a little two-wheel drive, and I was in the passenger side. It was so tall that I couldn't see when it got close to the front, and it started walking right down her side of the truck. And she looked up at this thing. She could look straight up at it. I couldn't see what was going on, and all I could see was the fur and the rump of it, and that's all, as it came by her driver's side window. She made this weird sound like she was sucking air, like she just looked straight. And I turned around and looked as it walked by the back window of the truck, and it walked kind of funny, like a dog's legs on the back, When a dog stands up, it looks almost like crippled when it walks. Its knees were backwards, and as it went on by, I thought, my God, what is that? And it jumped up on a little sage grass bank, and it cocked its head and looked at me with just his right eye. It never looked me right in the eyes, like straight over. I think I would have passed out. My cousin, when it jumped off in the woods, she said, that didn't look right. And we're still sitting there and idling. No, but it was so bold it came along her truck and walked real slow. It wasn't running or nothing like an animal, it just walked. I wasn't afraid, and I said it looked like a wolf. And she looked at me and she said, so you saw the same thing I saw? And she went to the preacher, and she asked them what was it. And he said that some people see demons, some people see angels. But for years it bothered me so bad. But when Linda Godfrey came out with The Beast of Bray Road, I started seeing sketches of it. I thought, okay, that's exactly what we saw, and it really helped me, and I really appreciate everything she's done. I'm from Henderson, Nevada. I live in a subdivision in Henderson, and there's like railroad tracks in the back of my house. I have someone living on each side, and I have someone at the front. So, like each side. I'm near the railroad track, right up to my backyard. So we do often have people walking along there, and when something does happen, there's never like cops on both sides zooming in with their lights and sirens. So I was being busy, my usual nosy self, and wondering what was going on. So I'm looking over my wall, and I got a little stepladder. I saw what they were looking at, something with a spotlight, like trying to find it or whatever. Then, what I saw, the first thing that popped into my head was a werewolf. Now, I don't know what an actual werewolf would look like, but that's what popped into my head. I immediately grabbed my cat and put my cat inside. I don't want to say I threw it, but I put the cat inside. I went back out and I saw the spotlight going back and forth, and this thing, it was like a hunchback, like kind of like a chupacabra would be, hunched over. But when I looked, the first thing that came into my mind was werewolf. I never heard about it either. Like whatever happened, they went away and nothing was ever in the newspaper, obviously. They're not going to say a werewolf found in Henderson, I don't think. This encounter happened in June of 2017. When I was younger, 16 or 17 I think, I had an encounter with something strange in the forest near Danbury, Wisconsin. Background on me is that I'm 6'4" and athletic. I'm an avid hunter, camper, and martial artist, generally a survivalist. I was naive and didn't give nature the proper level of respect, and basically was a cocky teenager who of course felt invincible. Our cabin had been on Long Lake in Danbury. The whole area is forested heavily for the most part. I was there on vacation with my cousin and grandparents. It was a nice and hot summer day, and we had decided to play airsoft. I took airsoft really seriously. I wore full woodland with camouflage mask even on. My cousin, who just wore jeans and a t-shirt, of course. We had a battle, which I took into the woods where I felt comfortable. We were about 150 meters into the forest when we stopped. Then I decided to tease my cousin. I shushed him and said, "We were being watched," jokingly, of course. Unfortunately, it turned out to not be much of a joke, because I immediately then noticed that the woods were dead quiet, which only happens when a large predator is around. I was on edge very quickly. Next, the feeling of being watched hit so hard, I started scanning the surrounding area, and then I saw it. The whitish teeth gave it away. What I saw was at the edge of it with its ears up. It had reddish brown hair and looked canine. In my head, it immediately clicked as a werewolf. I said to my cousin, "We have to go now," and he bolted. I still had my eyes on it when my cousin started sprinting. The creature then charged and it ran on two legs for maybe 10 feet and then dropped to all fours. And that's when I turned and sprinted out of there. I could hear it crashing through the woods behind. Once back at the cabin, we discussed it. It's still unclear if my cousin actually saw it. I told him that I thought it was a bear to not freak him out. But I know bears, and that was not a bear. I started doing research on these things after my encounter, which brought me to many Dogman-related sites. What I saw coincides with other people's sightings, and I am now far better about respecting nature, and am extremely cautious with the forests. If I go into nature alone, I am always armed, but I prefer not to be alone. Remember everybody, always trust your senses.